Professional Development Presentation by Christiana Coleman, Kairos University, Trauma, Grief and Loss Specialization, Spring 2025. I will be presenting on the topic, the influence of spirituality on trauma, grief and loss, losing faith or gaining perspective. This presentation is based on the book Turning the Corner on Grief Street by Terry Daniel. Introduction: Traumatic Experience and Loss of Faith. This presentation examines how trauma and loss can create a more spacious form of spiritual awareness. It is based on the central theme that loss of faith is not a loss at all, but a remarkable opportunity for spiritual and emotional expansion. It addresses the changes in spiritual perspective that can result from a traumatic experience. Introduction continued. The influence of spirituality on trauma, grief, and loss. When individuals experience trauma and loss, their beliefs about the world, about God, and themselves can be profoundly challenged. Some lose faith altogether, while others emerge with renewed spiritual insight. Some, when faced with trauma and loss, will use some aspects of religious functioning to cope. However, reactions vary. Some will embrace closely held religious ideas more fervently, while others will abandon spirituality altogether. The fact is, trauma, grief, and loss can fracture one's beliefs about good and evil, about security, and about the nature of God, and even about one's place in the universe. At times like this, re-evaluation of one's beliefs has the potential to produce tremendous personal growth, both psychologically and spiritually. Through the lens of existential grief counseling, this presentation examines how spiritual and theological frameworks influence grief and how clinicians can help individuals move from spiritual despair to renewed meaning, especially within culturally diverse contexts. Cultural and theological diversity in grieving. As explained in the introduction, spiritual responses to trauma are diverse and often culturally dependent. This dualistic view may offer comfort by placing blame outside the self, but it can also deepen despair when the suffering continues despite prayer and faith. In this view, emotional pain is not an interruption of life, but an invitation to presence and compassion. These worldviews deeply influence the grieving process. Koenig, Pergament, and Perez 2008 categorized religious coping into two. They submitted that religious coping can be positive and negative. Positive and negative religious coping. Positive religious coping includes seeking spiritual support, reframing pain as meaningful, and using faith to foster community. Negative religious coping involves feelings of punishment by God, spiritual discontent, and theological confusion. Clinical outcomes vary accordingly, with positive coping often linked to psychological resilience and negative coping associated with depression, anxiety, and complicated grief. Existential grief counseling in practice. Counselors must approach grief with humility and cultural sensitivity in multicultural and multi-faith clinical settings. The American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics 2014 emphasizes the importance of respecting clients' spiritual and cultural worldviews without imposing the counselor's own belief. One therapeutic model particularly suited to this spiritual reorientation is existential grief counseling. This approach centers on helping individuals discover meaning through loss rather than avoiding or rationalizing it. Bereavement counseling. The case of Maria. Counseling sessions with Maria with existential grief counseling model. 1. Maria's spiritual confusion was validated in early sessions, and space was created to vent. 2. Counselor helped Maria explore the meaning of motherhood, loss, and legacy. 3. Maria was given journaling exercises that asked her to write unsent letters to her son. 4. Guided imagery was used in sections, and this allowed her to imagine speaking to her son in comfortable places she remembered from his childhood. 5. Maria wondered why God would permit the tragedy and how she might honor Leo's memory. After other sessions and series of discussions on how Maria can honor Leo's memory, she finally figured out that volunteering will help her. Part of her volunteering was with a local bereavement group for mothers, using her story to support other people. 6. Maria did not return to the Catholic Church, but was going to quiet chapels. I considered this reaction as symbol of her redefined spiritual life. Lastly, yes, there wasn't the return of Maria's faith in its original form, but she gained something out of equal vastness in its place: a sense of meaning, connection, and peace. Ethical and clinical implications for counselors. 1. Maria's story reflects the potentials of existential grief counseling to hold space for spiritual deconstruction and recreation. 2. In line with the ACA mental health competencies, clinicians working with such clients must cultivate cultural responsiveness, spiritual attunement, and ethical clarity. 3. The goal is not to repair broken belief systems, but to accompany clients through the wilderness of unknowing until new meanings can be formed. 4. This process is rarely linear and often includes setbacks. Yet, as Terry Daniel 2010 reminds us, trauma is a teacher, and if honored rather than resisted, it can awaken preciously dormant parts of the soul. 5. Existential grief counseling not only addresses the psychological pain of loss, but also embraces its sacred dimensions. 6. When clients like Maria are empowered to shift from dogmatic faith towards fluid spirituality, they gain the freedom to grieve fully without feeling the need to justify their suffering. Lastly, 7. Whether the result is a return to faith, a new mystic perspective, or a secular yet meaningful outlook, the clinical task remains to bear witness to transformation. Conclusion. Ultimately, grief is not simply about what was lost, but about what can be gained in its wake. Trauma may dismantle our theological assumptions and expose our deepest vulnerabilities, but it also has the power to awaken compassion, deepen awareness, and reveal new truths. By integrating existential approaches with spiritual sensitivity, clinicians can walk alongside clients at the sacred crossroads of loss and transformation, helping them not only mourn what has been taken, but also embrace what might yet be born. Thank you for listening. I will appreciate questions, reactions, contributions, new insights. Thank you. I have my references on the last slide.